But the Antichrist will not be so called, otherwise he would have no followers. He will wear no red tights, nor vomit sulfur. His logic is simple. If there is no heaven, there is no hell. If there is no hell, there is no sin. If there is no sin, there is no judge. And if there is no judgment, then evil is good, and good is evil.
And we have to let go of this Hollywood understanding of evil, the flashy, tyrant, bloodthirsty tyrant. Now that exists.
Hello, this is the Zoom meeting of the HHL, and I'm Thomas, the Legatus Legionis.
I'm Chris, the contemplative and the perfecti.
And John Calcis. We're going to give a title to John, Centurion John Calcis. How's that sound?
That works for me. Thank you, sir.
I'd rather be a centurion than a Legatus Legionis. But anyways, okay, so this evening we are talking about a recording that Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen made in 1947, and it was about the Antichrist. This has become a very, very popular thing for the remnant to listen to during our times. Many people have heard this recording. Many people are amazed at this recording. Chris, you got any comment about that?
Yes, we have a lot of people, I think, resonating. They may not know the complete details, but the way Blessed Fulton Sheen, he always has a way of dissecting very complicated topics about culture and psychology, etc., and putting it in a way that resonates with what people see in their daily lives. The scary thing is that people are seeing his talk of the Antichrist and how we're pretty much in those times when the Antichrist agenda is here. They're like seeing it the way he's wording it. It's applying to where we are today.
Yes, I must confess I haven't seen all of it, but I have seen some of the shorter versions of what Chris said. You're seeing a lot of this play out now. I mean, he was really, in many ways, very prophetic.
It's almost uncanny, and we really don't think, I'm not trying to be insulting of Archbishop Sheen, but you really don't think of him as like an old school prophet. And I kind of wonder where he's coming from. Now, one of the directions that I think Archbishop Fulton Sheen is coming from is he is highly educated. And I actually have some information on that. Sheen completed a pair of doctoral degrees. He became fluent in French and earned a Doctor of Philosophy at the Catholic University of Louvain in Belgium in 1923. His thesis was titled The Spirit of Contemporary Philosophy and the Finite God. While at Louvain, he became the first American ever to win the Cardinal Mercier Award for the best philosophical treatise in 1924. Sheen pursued further studies in Rome, earning a sacred theology doctorate at the Pontificum Collegium International and Angelicum, the future Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas. Okay, that's very interesting. I did a little bit of research on the Mercier Award. Mercier was a cardinal in Belgium who was a known Thomist theologian. Clearly, Bishop Sheen was a Thomist. He did study under St. Thomas Aquinas theology in both cases. And of course, the Pontifical University are those that are improved by the Holy See. He was already well known in 1924. He was not a bishop at that time. Hi, Ann. Glad you could join us.
Hi, Thomas.
Okay. You can add commentary to what us guys are talking about. It'll be great to have an alternative voice here. They're a little bit more up on beat, and we've kind of discussed the show ahead of time, but you can, we want you to chime in as well.
Okay.
Archbishop Sheen is very intelligent, and he's very eloquent, but he also seems to be prophetic. Now, I don't know if he's prophetic because he could see what was happening within the culture in 1947. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe it was partly what he could see and also partly what the Holy Spirit inspired in him. We do not know, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to begin to dissect what the great Archbishop said. Now, I'm going to read this paragraph, and we're going to continue to set the tone for discussing Archbishop Fulton Sheen's discourse, his broadcast in 1947, titled The Antichrist. Here is one of the paragraphs. It is not the starting paragraph, but it is one that I want to highlight right now. But the Antichrist will not be so called, otherwise he would have no followers. He will wear no red tights, nor vomit sulfur, nor carry a spear, nor wave an arrowed tail, as the Mephistopheles in Faust. Nowhere in the sacred scriptures do we find warrant for the popular myth of the devil as a buffoon who is dressed like the first red. Rather is he described as a fallen angel, as the prince of this world, whose business it is to tell us that there is no other world. His logic is simple. If there is no heaven, there is no hell. If there is no hell, there is no sin. If there is no sin, there is no judge. And if there is no judgment, then evil is good, and good is evil. Okay, anyone want to take a crack at it?
I think that's the mindset we have to have if we want to look as to why we should consider his words so seriously. And we have to let go of this Hollywood understanding of evil, the flashy, tyrant, bloodthirsty tyrant. Now that exists, but you have to look deeper into what Blessed Fulton Sheen is going to say, explaining how the devil's working in these times. It's much more sinister and subtle than just, some very one-dimensional evil villain who, like Genghis Khan or something. There's a lot more intricacies as to how evil is working.
Okay, so he's saying that if he comes out saying, "Hello, I'm the Antichrist,"
right,
he won't have any followers.
No.
So this is a hidden agenda. John, go ahead.
If he just came right out and said that, then there has been a long-established, highly negative connotation associated with that figure, with that idea, with that notion. So yeah, he would be rejected, maybe not by all, but he would be rejected forthright. I'm reminded of the money quote, "The greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world that he didn't exist."
Okay.
And I think that fits in perfectly with the notion that you see elements in the culture trying to do this now, trying to convince us that evil is good and good is evil, or that everything is relative and everything more absolute. There is no objective truth. So you can certainly see how there is an effort to convince people that, well, this isn't really evil. It's this action. Look what they've done with abortion, for example. Okay, look what they've done with other things that we're battling over in the culture. It's not evil. It's just a different lifestyle. It's a different this or different that. It's a different way of identifying, viewing one's own identity, and you know what I'm talking about there. But
okay, so Anne, we're looking around and trying to understand what is happening in our times. We got our binoculars on and we're searching and trying to understand. Because indeed, it all seems to be cloudy and murky. What do you think?
Well, I don't think it's that cloudy or murky.
It's not to you, okay?
No, I think a few years ago, God kind of opened my eyes a little bit to seeing just how extreme the level of evil was getting, and I just felt like it couldn't just be like a natural phenomenon. It had to be supernatural. So that made me realize this is a spiritual battle. And that's what kind of brought me back to my faith, is just seeing kind of the devil overplay his hand a bit. I never thought I'd see things in my lifetime, that had happened. It's just every day, more and more of the pieces come into the puzzle. And it's nice to be able to see these things, because I don't know how people can't see it.
Yeah, there's a normalcy that flows out of humanity, the family, A mother and father come together, they have kids, they take care of those kids, they love those kids, they protect those kids, they raise those kids, they teach those kids. This is a very normal thing that flows out of just a normal human experience. It is not just in Christianity. It has been that way throughout the world in every culture. But we have seen the dismantling of this normal thing of humanity being totally distorted and teared at. So what we're going to do next is we're going to backtrack, because that's kind of a little bit further down Bishop Sheen's broadcast. And I'm going to go to the paragraph that was right before the one where he begins to talk about the Antichrist, because he points to a buildup, a cultural causation that makes this all happen. And some of it sounds a little bit confusing, although he's such a splendid orator that just about everybody gets it, that there was a cultural something that happened and that we're in a different time. Now, he wasn't yet in that time, 1947, but we seem to be in that time, and we're going to be taking a deeper look at that. Let me read this paragraph.
I think you're talking about Bishop Sheen.
Yes. Hello, JC. Glad to have you with us. JC is here with us only on audio.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, JC, listen up. From now on, the struggle will be not for the colonies and national rights, but for the souls of men. The battle lines are being clearly drawn, and the basic issues are no longer in doubt. From now on, men will divide themselves into two religions. Understand again as the surrender to an absolute. The conflict of the future is between an absolute, who is the God-man, and an absolute, which is the man-God. Between the God who became man and the man who makes himself God. Between brothers in Christ and comrades in Antichrist.
Interesting how he uses the word comrade too. I don't know if that was intentional or if it was just incidental, but he uses the word
not with Bishop Sheen.
Yeah,
not with Bishop Sheen, because he was very, very aware of the issue of communism, and he was also very, very aware, of course, of Our Lady of Fatima. Mm-hmm. So I don't have any doubt that there's no mistake that he's believing the final conflict will be against communism.
For sure.
I think it's important to remember there is a term being thrown around, I'd say, 2 years ago or more by various conservatives, and the term is cultural Marxism. Because at least where I'm living, maybe in Canada and other places, it's getting a little bit more apparent. Even where I'm living, even in this current time, the idea of a large group of communists running around, like the idea that America will become communist is still very foreign to our psychology. We're like that for most people, that still seems a bit out there. And if we think of cultural Marxism, like these cultural ways we start seeing people as almost like a comrade or a brother, I think you can kind of see that there's like this umbrella that he's touching on, this umbrella of, people, like Thomas, you were talking to us, like people over truth. What people say is more important, than what truth is. They can make up their own thing. So I just wanted to throw that out there to kind of lay the ground on that.
Cultural Marxism, a form of socialism or communism, where the goal was to undermine the Western institutions.
Right.
We're racists. We are, what else? We're racist.
Capitalists.
Capitalists, yeah.
We're
bourgeois.
capitalists.
we're greedy.
We're greedy.
Sexist.
All of these things. And you don't want to be that. You want to be for all the people, and you want to, take care of the poor,
right,
and all these other things. Not that Christians don't take care of the poor. It's an oxymoron. And that's that is Marxism. That's cultural Marxism. Okay, that they're coming in and they're saying, we need to do this. We need to have universal medicine. We need to have everybody needs to be fed, irregardless, et cetera, and only then are we going to have a fair and good society. And this is the cultural Marxism that has crept into our country. It has nothing to do with people using their own initiative, taking care of themselves, taking care of their families. The state's supposed to do that, et cetera, okay? So that's your point, Chris, that we have cultural Marxism. Progressivism is close to cultural Marxism, the philosophies of Hillary Clinton and Saul Alinsky and all these people, Obama. Obama was a little bit more about world globalism, trying to bleed out our country into, and that's why we saw, all that was left because of Obama in our country was the service industry, and people don't make very much, but that was okay with Obama. But our current move with people like Biden and Ocasio-Cortez and people like that is actually more leaning, and Bernie Sanders, towards socialism and communism. And that is the path that we are heading down. Archbishop Fulton Sheen knew full well that communism was going to be an issue of our times. But let's look at something else much more important that he said. The conflict of the future is between an absolute who is the God-man and an absolute which is the man-God.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Do it.
Up until that point, for the 2,000 or so years leading up to Archbishop Sheen making that statement, we in the West, we were guided by Judeo-Christian ideas, Judeo-Christian philosophies, and that always had God at the center of everything. I think he started to see, and I think he's actually talked about this, I think he started to see the development, kind of the emergence of the man-God, or the underpinnings, the cultural underpinnings that would lead to that. He started to see that happening very early on in his life, even. Okay, as a priest, as a bishop, as an archbishop, as a member of the episcopate, he's on the front lines and he's watching the cultural changes. And I know that he talked about many of them. And so his term, man God, it's kind of an all-inclusive, kind of an umbrella term, I think, to capture the 180-degree phase shift that he sees as the objective of the Antichrist, to take the focus completely off of God, to take man's focus completely off of his creator and put it back on himself. And you see this reflected in numerous areas. New Age ideas come to mind. New
Age religion, right, Chris, is nothing more.
Yeah. They outright say it. Yeah, and I would also say, again, what John's saying is pointing that there's an umbrella he saw where, you could even say that just the fact, like John's saying, of the fact that God isn't mentioned, the omission of God, and how like everything in media and culture is about, might being nice to people, but there's nothing about the transcendent God is a part of this bigger umbrella. Of course, communism is a part of it, but it doesn't have to be outright Soviet communism or something like that. It could be what John's saying.
You know what I think is also, and I don't want to get us off track here, but it's worth mentioning. I've kind of been chomping at the bit to do that over the last 10 minutes or so, but I will mention this. We don't have to go down this track right now, but we should come back to it at some point, I think. In 1963, Congressman Albert Herlong, who was a Democrat from Florida, read into the congressional record 45 goals of communism, the way that they were going to take over the U.S. Their stated goals, they actually said this. The CPUSA, the Communist Party USA at the time, actually said this. They put together this list of 45 goals. And if you read through that, you're going to see, like, hey, Sheen talked about that. Hey, that's exactly what he was referring to there.
Yeah. If we begin to delve into it, yes, we find that there are people trying to engineer change. But let's move on from that and let's get back to what it means to have the man God or the God man. I'm gonna go ahead and ask you, Anne, if you want to say anything on that.
Well, it's a satanic inversion. So instead of worshiping God, man worships himself. So that's exactly what we see in the book of Revelation. And I think that it's this spirit of, there's nothing else besides the material world. And so there's no objective truth, no objective reality, and we can just write our own laws. There's no lawgiver. That's the idea. So if that's true, then it's like my truth is my truth. And, there's nothing that can judge us objectively from the outside. That's the idea. And I guess it just all gets crystallized into a single person that exemplifies that whole thing. And that's the Antichrist.
Hold on, JC. I'm going to let you answer the next paragraph. I'm reading these in reverse, by the way. So, JC, I want you to listen to this and then comment on it. In the new era into which we are entering is what might be called the religious phase of human history. Do not misunderstand me. By religious, we do not mean that men will turn to God, but rather that the indifference to the absolute, which characterized the liberal phase of civilization, will be succeeded by a passion for an absolute. Okay, now first off, I'm going to define a little bit of this. He's saying that we are going past the liberal phase. In other words, the Hillary Clintons and all of that, that's going to be old news. And we are entering into a new era that Bishop Sheen says is a religious phase, that people will be very passionate.
Yeah.
What do you think, JC?
Well, I hate to bring it back to something so mundane and repetitive, but that religious passion where there's no thought, but there's memorization and there's statement, it's almost where you're blanked out, that is surrounding the medical problem we're facing, where camps are divided because you can't get through to someone who already believes it with a passion. I have that in my family and I see it everywhere. They believe it with a passion and they're speaking in a way that completely excludes what they knew in their faith. I mean, it's such a, what Anne said, it's upside down. In medieval terms, that was expressed where people were being cartwheeling and tumbling. That would mean the natural and the supernatural order were inverted. And that's what we see. What Anne said, things are upside down, and they are exactly what is playing out in front of us, where even doctors can't listen to science.
Okay, so we have people believing things that are not even true.
Yes.
Right?
So they are actually being religious in their perspective.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
I think there's something also, there's a little bit deeper too.
Yes.
And that is, we've reached a certain point where people's longing for something spiritual is no longer able to be ignored.
Wow.
There is a longing there. There is a desire that's deep-seated within us. And I think that it's in Scripture.
Chris, that's being related in the New Age movement, isn't it?
Absolutely. You guys are, I actually thought of what, Jay, you literally worded what I was thinking, right? I think we all maybe thought of the same thing. But the New Age is very interesting because you have people, they don't know what they're talking about, have like a bajillion different philosophies. They cram together. They're usually, I would call, spoiled Westerners. The Buddhists laugh at them trying to pretend that they're Buddhist. And yet they talk in such authoritative words about how Jesus went to India and he was really a guru and we're all going to be one. And they're just so sure of it. They're so sure of it. And so I think with them, it's almost like you already see what's really going on in people's hearts in terms of like, you can be so into this thing. You can be so into this egoistic, oh, I have my own truth and I know the truth, even though that changes according to what the CDC says, but I'll pretend that didn't happen. But you see this egoism poison their own spirituality. I'm spiritual, but not religious.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Do you like that phrase, John? I'm spiritual, but not religious. What do you think of that, John?
I think I'd like to hear that extrapolated out a bit more. What do you actually mean by that? Because I don't think there's any meaning there. It's something that's it's so sugar coated. It sounds great, but when you try to unpack it, it's completely empty. There's
What
no
about
foundation.
what about fake faith? It's a fake faith.
Yeah.
We
makes them feel better.
believe in a God that is there. They believe in a God that is not definable. Fake faith.
I wonder how much they realize that this is actually just them worshiping their subconscious desires. Maybe some of them do, maybe some of them don't. But I just think it's like literally people like, you know, that in their head, and we have a problem with the intellect being an idol. So whatever comes to my head that I feel is great, I can even make that a religion. Heck, why not? You know, because it makes me feel good, and no one ever challenged me. I didn't have a dad. I didn't have any good pastors. So heck, you know, I'll pick and choose my yoga mat or whatever. And I see that it's an actual self-worship. I don't know how much they actually know they're worshiping themselves, but it's a narcissism.
It is, and I don't think there's necessarily a God that they worship other than just some kind of generalized, power in the universe or something, which they want to harness and control. Like, I think it's a desire to have
Oh, that's
power.
interesting.
They talk about it like the Christ consciousness, and we're evolving into this new phase, and we're all going to be ascended masters and things like that. And they just seek to, like some of them even are like maybe pagan witchcraft, like they'll try to, cast spells, and, like they want control. They want to know the future. They want to communicate with their spirit guides so they can be successful and achieve all their goals and maybe get their enemies, it's like, it's all based on their own need for power and control.
And you know what's sad, sweet? It's what you just said there, those key terms are things that they've just heard from other people. It's not original. They literally just think they've discovered something without even having respect for any mystery for truth. So it's really very marketable and profitable for a lot of, let's just say fraudulent types out there to make money or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start at the beginning of what Archbishop Sheen said. And we're going to be looking at construction of how we ended up where we're at. So we need to take all of this apart and take a look at it, because that's what this segment is all about. It's all about how did Archbishop Sheen arrive at where we are at. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start reading, and then we're going to have commentary from our group here, and we'll see if we can gain some understanding on that. Why is it that so few realize the seriousness of our present crisis? Partly because men do not want to believe their own times are wicked. Partly because it involves too much self-accusation, and principally because they have no standards outside of themselves to measure their times. Only those who live by faith really know what is happening in the world.
Now, I want to think about what you said. It's really evident that people who really are, I don't mean people who are really close to God. I mean people who seek God with their whole heart and seek the God we know, not a God out there, not friendly, all that stuff. If you're seeking God, it becomes very clear what's happening. It's been very clear for about 5 or 10 years. And the hard part is coming to terms with it, because we see it so clearly, and we see things imploding like 5 years ago in a church where you expect at least faith. It's not the supermarket, it's not the library, it's the church. And I think that just magnifies the problem when you realize they aren't understanding what actually is really happening. And yes, there might be a temporary time where everybody's, I don't mean the old phrase kumbaya, but everybody's out doing their own thing, and they're happy because they think that everyone's going to be taken care of and the world is going to be good and dogs are good and people are good. But we can sense it here. The noose is being tightened, and it's becoming obvious that within short time, those people will begin to understand that it isn't so loosey-goosey. It's very serious. It's very programmed attempt to change everything. Every freedom will be gone to think like that even. They're not there yet. They're sort of enjoying this hazy time. But faith tells us, our hearts tell us, that God is being rebuked, God is being downplayed, he's being removed from our lives systematically. constitutionally and every other way, and now culturally, when we are forced to coexist with things that we believe are wrong and not say anything, and the people that are supposed to believe them as true, i.e. hierarchy, are embracing them, and everything in our heart knows it's wrong.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read on because what JC introduces us to the next paragraph. I love this when Archbishop Sheen says this. He does it so eloquently and so powerfully. I'll try to give a little bit of oomph to my own interpretation of it, and we'll see if we can't explode our own minds with this. This is a very explosive statement. Well, may our Savior say to us what he said to the Sadducees and Pharisees in his time. When it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning today there will be a storm, for the sky is red and lowering. You know then how to discern the face of the sky. And can you not know the signs of the times?
Whistling past the graveyard.
You have to say more than that, John.
I was just trying to encapsulate it in one phrase, but I think there's two things that are foundational here, two elements. Number one is pride. You mentioned in the reading just before the paragraph that you read, where people don't think that they need to accuse themselves of any wrongdoing. That's pride. We've touched on things that are related to pride throughout the discussion. But the other foundational element is affluence. We've gotten so comfortable here, especially in this country and in the West in general. We're so comfortable with our lifestyles that we don't need God anymore. And we can't imagine, many of us can't envision a time when there would be difficulties, when there would be a need for God, when there would be challenges, when we would, when everything that we've tried to construct for ourselves to make our lives comfortable and easy and fun and whatnot, when all of that starts to collapse and there's nothing else left to turn to except God. We've got to the point now where, even, I think back to the financial crisis of 2008, and that was painful, but that wasn't. You talk to people that lived through the Great Depression, and they were just like, "What are you kidding me? This is a blip compared to what we saw."
I agree with that. That's the one term for that is normalcy bias, where if all you've ever known is stability and prosperity in your society, then it's almost impossible to imagine what would happen. How, if the store shelves were empty, if everything broke down, if there was no law and order, we haven't experienced that in, our whole lives. Prices have been rising, and maybe some of us are old enough to remember the inflation of the 70s, but, I was a kid, so I remember hearing about it on the news. I didn't really live the pain of it, but that's nothing compared to what probably will happen. So
we've also seen things happening in our country. Here in the United States, we have seen, like every year, we're getting these disastrous hurricanes. And so those people they're getting their power knocked out, their water, they're finding themselves trying to live subsistence and different things like this. In a way, are these kind of like signs of the times? Anyone want to speak up? Because we have seen a lot of disasters lately.
Yeah.
Oh, there's one that isn't even a hurricane. There's the, and this is public news, the lightning bolt that split George Floyd's memorial in half. That one was pretty on the nose. I just whistled a little bit and I was like, yeah, that's where we're at, people.
I didn't hear about that. Wow.
I didn't hear about that. That sounds really cool.
John, do you know about this one?
Oh yeah.
All right, so John's seen it.
Like the Texas power grid going down because they had only wind power, I guess, and they didn't plan for the cold weather, and so then they weren't able to generate the power.
No one thought anything like that could happen in Texas.
Right.
I am a Texan, and we do not think in those terms in Texas, but it happened.
Yes.
And people died.
Yeah.
And people were in subsistence, situation. But we're seeing these things happening. Are they the signs of the time? Now, I'm going to go ahead and move on. I'm going to move on to Bishop Sheen's words. Do we know the signs of our times? they point to two inescapable truths. The first, which is that we have come to the end of the post-Renaissance chapter of history, which made man the measure of all things. Chris, what is post-Renaissance?
The Renaissance there was a humanism that spread that was actually promoted by the church. And this is a Catholic humanism. This is a Christian humanism. A lot of great things came from that.
Michelangelo,
Right.
Michelangelo did paintings where he understood the biology
Right.
of the human body.
Yes.
So when you look at his works, you see he's trying to bring out the beauty of man, but in relationship to God. You know, we got the famous Sistine Chapel of God touching man, but we see this great beauty in man. Chris, that was a flip in thinking at the time?
Yes. There was there were some very brilliant scholars that in the church really promoted this. They were like, okay, let's take what we know from what we're seeing with mysticism. Let's stop focusing so much on death, because now we have a greater system of trade. The Black Death's over, and the world did not end after the Black Death. So like, oh, okay, that wasn't. They thought it was going to be it, and they were like, well, let's see if we can focus a more thankful to God, appreciation of God through creation, which is fine.
Okay, but that's really not post-Renaissance.
That's not what we're talking about. Post-Renaissance, we're talking about the scientific revolution and the eventual mid to late Enlightenment. You had these thinkers, I would say Voltaire was one of the big, stars of this, where they would start looking into science to such an extent, they were so bedazzled by these new philosophies and scientific discoveries, there was actual doubt being sowed into how much God cares, or if God even exists. Should religion really be taken seriously anymore? Do we really need it that much?
Okay.
Now, they didn't.
And my understanding is that started around the 1700s.
Yes, it was, a lot of them are deists. Okay, so they weren't out and out atheists necessarily, but a lot of these figures they're like, well, God helps those who helps themselves. He kind of lets things go. Maybe he's a theory. It wasn't outright atheism, but it was in the spirit of there is no living God, a God of miracles, a God who loves us. That we got science to take care of most of our problems. There's this attitude that came from that.
Okay, so we were kind of born into a society that God was important, but he wasn't central.
Right.
God was important, but he wasn't the center. And, I know that's how I grew up in the 70s. I'm assuming, Ann, you grew up in the same culture I did.
Yeah.
I mean,
70s and 80s.
Everyone acknowledged that God was, but he wasn't the central aspect of our culture.
Right. Yeah. God was present in. You go to church on Sunday. People, you could talk to certain people about God, but you couldn't really walk around with this attitude of faith. Really, that's kind of was sort of discouraged. Maybe in the name of respect for maybe Jewish people, or it's like it was like just discouraged.
Yeah,
in public schools. Yeah,
we all got along in
right.
our country. But at the same time, let's say if you were fanatically excited about God, you were marginalized.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bishop Sheen is saying we're at the end of that era.
Yeah.
That's over. So I'm going to read on. We're ending the post-Renaissance era. We're trying to define what Bishop Sheen is saying. The three basic dogmas of the modern world, this is Bishop Sheen, are dissolving before our very eyes. First, we are witnessing the liquidation of the economic man, or the assumption that man, who is a highly developed animal, has no other function in life than to produce and acquire wealth, and then, like the cattle in the pastures, be filled with years and dies. That sounds like America. Okay,
it's utilitarianism. It's man is just nothing more than what he can produce or consume. We're consumers. We're not citizens or children of God. Yeah.
All right, that was stated very well. I'm going to move on. Secondly, we are witnessing the liquidation of the idea of the natural goodness of man, who has no need of a God to give him rights or a redeemer to salvage him from guilt, because progress is automatic thanks to science, education, and evolution, which we will one day make man a kind of God. We are witnessing also the liquidation of rationalism, or the idea that the purpose of human reason is not to discover the meaning and goal of life, namely the salvation of a soul, but to devise new technical advances to make on this earth a city of man to displace the city of God. Anyone want to take a stab?
Yeah.
John, let's hear from you,
Well,
John.
there.
Let's hear from John. He's falling asleep over there.
No, no. There's a lot here. I'm wondering where to begin.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I think what he's referring to is, now we've reached a point where, the
Post-Renaissance.
Post-Renaissance, but not only that, but we're not looking at man as an economic creature anymore. But now we've got to tap into his need for spiritual fulfillment. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is, instead of going back to the old ways, we're going to set him up as this is the self-deification, where you can, man, because of your intellect, because of your ability to control the universe, and you can bend the universe to your will. You can bend the laws of attraction to your will. Let's feed his pride as much as possible, and keep his eyes off of the old ways, off of his creator.
Okay, let's break this down, everyone. What do these people look like? We have a group of people that have made man God. We're representing in this little group the people who acknowledge that Jesus is God. He is the God man.
Yeah.
What do these people look like who think that they are becoming God? Anyone?
Transhuman.
Go ahead, JC.
You were talking about the liquidation of all what we have known. I assume that means now that's over, and we're in the era of the robots. We're in the transhumanism, and a perfect, healthy person might be part man and part machine. I really think that's what they're working towards. They're not really working towards the human dignity. There's no human freedom. Those things are not part of the equation. They're working towards a transhumanism, where the machinery and the robotics, and that's a perfect person. In their Agenda 21, when you read really thoroughly, it says we ascribe to the perfect healthy human being, and then down a little lower, without illness or frailty. Oh, tell me who? It doesn't just mean old people are gone. It means then they go in to introduce the part that's mechanical, and we'll all be able to overcome death, that kind of stuff. So we're into another completely different phase of life. And it isn't Christocentric for sure. It isn't even God for sure.
John?
They're the God. Yes. And even beyond that, now the individual will be secondary. The interest of the individual will be secondary, will become secondary to the interest of the collective.
Yes,
the interest of the state.
Yes.
And you will be, what they want is ultimately, they want good citizens.
Yes.
Well, aren't we already seeing that with all the mandates and masks and?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why they want everyone to get, are we recorded here? So yeah, no one can be not part of the group. We all have to conform. And that's why, the creepy messages in the grocery store, we're all in this together.
Oh, and
do you remember a few months ago? Like, that's what I heard in my grocery store.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And it's just, you have to sacrifice yourself for the collective.
Which is a form of communism, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So, Chris, how does the whole transgender thing work in all this?
Right. Well, okay. So the transgender thing is actually a breakdown of objective reality within the psyche. It's like because when I look at this whole transgender thing, they're actually making new genders and sexualities. Like it just hundreds, keeps building. It's practically a joke on the internet, but it really isn't that funny, because it's really this idea that reality is mine. Reality is mine to define. But with that happening, see, they do that, and yet because they're into this rabid OCD, ADD, I'm always redefining myself, that can be easily be manipulated by the forces at bay. And so it's not just, oh, people are becoming crazy, they just want to become men want to become women, women want to become men. This can be harnessed by some really bad people. And
it's like a freaking, you know, role-playing game.
Right.
You know?
Right. Exactly.
Dangerous on so many levels. I mean, it's breakdown of the family,
Yes, and
denial of biology. You know, I mean, we learned all in biology class about chromosomes, right? You know, XX is female, XY is male. And there's, you know, just very rare, you know, chromosomal problems where somebody's intersex. But they're just saying that, oh, okay, you can just, if you're born a man, you can become a woman. That basically, and now they're saying it's people can have babies, not women. And, you know, just basically insulting people by, you know, saying that there really is no such thing as a woman anymore, no such thing as a man anymore. You know, we're just redefining it all. And I think this really is communistic because it's trying to break down people into just interchangeable automatons. There's no more like family as the unit of society anymore.
They want people to believe that they can define their own objective truth and own objective reality.
Right, and that's the other level that's so evil. Yeah.
Right.
You know, I was talking with Chris and John earlier, and I was trying to point out a little bit about psychological development. You know, a mother and father have a child, and the child, when he reaches a certain age, you know, looks, you know, let's say it's a boy, looks at mom and goes, man, mom is the most beautiful woman in the world. You know, when I get bigger, I wanna marry someone just like mom. You know, and then he looks, the little boy looks over at dad and said, man, my dad is the strongest and the best man that there is, and I want to be just like him. And that little boy gains a natural self-identity. I'm a boy, and I'm going to grow up and be a man. And as we were talking, Chris, I think Chris pointed out to me, you know, that they are destroying the identities of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's it really makes me really sad, and I mean that serious. It's one of the worst sorrows of my life to see the confusion and corruption put onto these younger generations. It's actually tragic.
It's child abuse.
It is
Literal child abuse. It makes my mama grizzly come out, and I just want to, like, you know, go after somebody because I'm really angry, and they've shown their colors. They don't care. They will destroy a child just for their sick ideology. It's so evil. And then the masks are part of this whole thing too. You know, a child needs to be able to see facial expressions. So what is this doing to this generation of kids that can't see people's faces?
Right.
it's making them afraid.
Yeah.
And another consequence of this is that children, future generations, going to lose the ability to recognize the truth.
Yes.
And I'll bring up an example that when I spoke with Thomas and Chris earlier today. I was having a discussion with somebody many years ago, actually not too long ago. I noted a series of demonstrable facts in my argument. Okay, these are things you could easily go and research, prove for yourself. You didn't have to take my word for it. And what this person said to me was, those are your truths.
Mm-hmm.
And this person was just a living example of just pure subjectivity. They've adopted this mindset of pure subjectivity. Everything is subjective. Everything is as I defined it. There is no objective truth anymore.
How can everyone have their own truth?
Right.
I mean,
well, they can because these people are beginning to say that the only thing matters is what people believe or think or feel, and that objective truth is not even important anymore. And so when you look out and you say, who are the people supporting the Democrats? Who are the people who are supporting the mandates and the different things that are going on? Okay, the young people have lost self-identity. So they're being led around like zombies or sheep, all right? The elite are trying to lead everything to a global world order because they're going to benefit. They're going to benefit economically. They are going to benefit from the power. They're going to benefit, by being the ones who are leading everything. Then you have the people in the middle who are like, well, we want to be God. So we're talking about the New Agers. We have the New Agers, and then we have the atheistic scientists. And we also have the atheistic people who are following the atheistic scientists, okay, who are saying, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. So therefore, the only thing that exists is man. And so we need to advance man in every way, shape, or form. And these people do not care anything about anymore. They just don't care about it anymore. Western philosophy, theology, any of these things,
Beauty.
truth, law, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, JC.
I was just saying it's part of the intention to change us with our sense of dignity as children of God. That works well. And they're so cavalier about it. They're so evil about it that they don't care if children change gender. It's got nothing to do with the outcome. It's just going to be to make us more objectified so that they can order us and we'll fall into place. This is all distraction, just like the climate change. It's all distraction, all fake distraction, entertainment. Change your gender, men having babies. Also, it's a bit chauvinistic because in Canada, you're not allowed to say women are breastfeeding. You have to say they, you have to use the word they because men are offended because some of them are fake, fake breastfeeding.
Because they're women.
Yeah,
Not men.
They're men, and they want to be acknowledged as if they're breastfeeding their babies, and it's so ridiculous. But if you say anything about it, you can be fined. But it's all in the hope, I believe, really, ultimately, of objectifying us. We lose any sense of connection to each other. We lose any sense of freedom, and we don't have. Only the devil brings the fear that's been brought to the earth. Only evil creates fear to control. All part of the plan. They've got children terrified that won't even look you in the eye as they pass you in church. When they know they're safe, they're holding their parents' hand. And even if you say hello, they're afraid to look. And that makes me sort of very sad, but really, really angry because it's part of the plan. The plan is to dehumanize us this way. We be demoralized, we lose our sense of dignity as children of God and as meaningful people. Well, we watch these terrible things happen, and it's called hate speech if we speak about it. So it's all part of the plan. Sorry, that's all. I'll be still and quiet.
Well, that's good. There was a ex-KGB agent that talked about the process, and part of it was demoralization. That's what this is.
Yes.
It's a war against us.
Yes, it
is. Psychological warfare.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to close it on JC's words because I think that she encapsulated the whole segment, believe it or not. And so we're going to go ahead and close it out. We are actually past an hour. I don't really want to run past an hour. Sorry, Anne, but
no, it's okay.
We could talk forever on this.
Thanks,
we could be here for the next 4 hours discussing this. But we have covered the topic somewhat. We have touched on the issues. We have taken a look at the Antichrist by the first part. And next week we'll be covering the next part. We'll be looking at him, the Archbishop, actually talking about who the Antichrist is. So we will be continuing this discussion next week. I thank everyone who's here with me, John, Chris, Ann, and JC. And I wish that everyone have a very, very blessed evening, day, or whatever you're having when you see this video.
God bless you all.
May everyone have Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. So praise be to God.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Chris.